Hey guys, and welcome to another video. So today I'm going to be reviewing Perilous Healing by Jessica Ashley. It's the fifth and final book in the Coastal Hope series. So if you guys have been watching my channel, you know I've been reading this whole series throughout the month, and I've been the month of November 2024, and I've read the whole series in this month of November 2024, and I've been reviewing them. You guys are probably watching this January, February, sometime in 2025. Sorry, but I have other videos that I'm doing on Mondays, but I'm gonna get these out as soon as I can. So yeah, the last few books I have really enjoyed, but the ending of the fourth one was kind of disappointing. The ending of I think it was the second one, was kind of disappointing. I felt like the third one changed things up enough that it wasn't so repetitive, but the last one kind of got repetitive. And that was my main concern with this book, was that there was a pattern in the series where, spoiler alert, it's like romance and suspense kind of tied together, and then at the end the bad guy kidnaps the girl, reveals the plan. The bad guy is usually a girl that you're least expecting that's somehow involved, and then the good guy rescues the girl, the love interest basically, and then happily ever after, and ties up loose ends. And loose ends are tied up within like a chapter or two, and it's over. And that's the ending. And so I started to be able to figure out basically who it was. Like the fourth book, I called who the bad guy was just because of the pattern was so familiar. And so the third book changed things up because in the middle, the main couple was kidnapped together. But the fourth book kind of got back to that same mold, and I felt like the bad guy reveal was not as dramatic as who the mystery could have set it up to be. So the last book kind of disappointed me, even though those characters in that book, I was attached to them a lot more. I still enjoyed it. It was a 4.5 star read for me, I think. However, Perilous Healing for me, it was when I first discovered the series, I kind of scanned through all the blurbs. The blurb for this one was the one that stood out the most, and I started reading this one as a sample, and I fell in love with it. But when I bought the series, I wanted to start at the beginning and read through it in order. So I've been waiting for this one for a long time. However, because of the disappointment of the last one and how they were starting to get predictable, I was kind of getting burnt out with the series just because of the predictability of it, and I was very, very concerned. But I will say this book did not disappoint. Oh my gosh, this is the best book of the series. It is amazing. So basically we have Silas and Bianca. Both of them have been side characters kind of built up in the previous books. She's the medic that has been helping their team. She's been working with the Army Rangers, and Silas is a Navy SEAL who was befriending them, and they got to know him, and he's been helping. And we found out kind of through his story a little bit too, that he was captured and tortured for a brief period of time. And so he kind of stays to himself. He has a lot of trauma that he's dealt with, but in this book it's revealed that him and Bianca know each other, and they were captured together for a time. They went on the run, and I won't spoil that story there, but that's kind of like, you find that out pretty like soon as the story starts. So not only do we get, like, I think the book even starts off with that moment when it's like 10 years ago, I don't know how long ago it was, but like when they were in that situation together. And so it's an immediate, like, intense part. And I will say that this one felt so much better balanced between the romance and the suspense. The previous ones, some of them have been, some of them haven't been, and some of them were kind of slower because of that, because either like the romance was kind of like, you know, more focused, and so the suspense kind of took a back burner. Like the last one was kind of like a romance with like a mystery thrown in there, so it didn't feel as suspenseful at times. Whereas this one, pretty quickly you find out that due to her past, basically people are coming after Bianca. Not going to spoil that either. And so they do have a lot to deal with, Bianca and Silas, because of their past, their history, and it creates this really interesting conflict for their relationship, I guess you could say. And on top of that, neither of them are believers, so it kind of focuses on how Bianca finds her faith, and she does so pretty quickly in the book. But Silas takes longer, and he's dealing with all of the trauma, and I feel like the author, Jessica Ashley, handled the trauma well, handled what he's gone through, handled his faith and his issues with God very, very well. I really, really liked the Christian messaging in this book. even more so than the previous ones, and I feel like it was handled very, very well. I definitely, like the past books, the only Christian issue I really had with the past books was that it was like almost too perfect and nobody questions anything, nobody sins, and it was just like this too happy, unrealistic version of Christianity, because even Christians, we mess up, we make mistakes, like we don't all perfectly go to church and perfectly listen to Christian music and perfectly pray all the time and never doubt God and never question God, you know, and it just creates this unrealistic expectation. And then when you read something like that, it gets in your head. And then when you fall short, it kind of makes you feel bad, like you're not a true Christian because you feel short. Or like when the characters all pray and God always comes through, sometimes God doesn't answer with a yes, sometimes God tells us no, sometimes God tells us to wait, sometimes God allows us to go through bad things. He's still good and he's always good, but sometimes it's hard to understand that. Sometimes it's really hard to face that, and I feel like the previous books didn't bring that out. But because Bianca and Silas aren't coming at this from Christians, they start off like not really being Christians, I feel like this actually handles that much better because both of them question God at some point. Bianca not so much, but Silas definitely questions God enough that it really makes it more grounded in reality, as opposed to the rest of them. The Christian aspect kind of felt a little out of touch with reality, like this perfect little paradise, which is fine. Some people like to read that, and some people that actually helps because you want to escape reality. That's perfectly fine. Wasn't my cup of tea really. And the other Christian messaging in the book is still really good. In the other books are still really good, but I feel like this one really hit close to home. Just not really hit close to home, but it like touched me in a way because it was like so much more grounded in reality. And I really like Silas's journey. I like Bianca's journey, and I like their romantic storyline. But let me tell you what, this book, the main thing that for me makes this the best book in the series and a 5-star read, finally, I'm so excited to have a 5-star read in the series. The main reason why, all of that combined with the fact that the plot completely changes. She flips the plot on its head and finally did something completely different that broke the mold and wasn't predictable. And I gotta say kudos to Jessica Ashley because she really, really built up the ante. Like I just can't praise it enough. Like she really upped the ante, I guess is what I'm trying to say, for the suspenseful plot line. I wasn't expecting it to go the direction it did, but the rest of the book, once I hit like page 100, it was like 80 to 100. So like 50% of the way through it, the whole half of the book was just absolutely intense. And even then, things kept escalating, and there were several instances in there that I was not expecting that completely broke the mold, and that's kind of what I needed. It's a little sad that I was almost getting burnt out on the same type of copy and paste plotline by the time I got to this book, but the good news is this book kind of broke that mold, shattered that, and it was not predictable in the slightest. And the thing is, the cool part is you kind of know who the bad guys are right from the start, so it's not a question of who did it. It's more of a question of how they're going to get out of the situation they're in. And it really felt like a true romantic suspense because on the one hand, from a stylizing, like a pacing kind of style perspective on a romantic suspense, you could have romance moments and then suspense moments and then romance moments, suspense moments, and kind of go back and forth between them to keep it even. That's kind of hard to pull off if you don't keep the moments directly even so that there's an equal amount of romance and an equal amount of suspense. A lot of times, sometimes what ends up happening, like what happened with previous books, is you have a romantic plot line and then the suspense takes a back burner, or you have too much suspense and not enough romance, vice versa. So, but in this one, because of what's going on, they're thrown into a suspenseful circumstance and the romance happens in the middle of it. It feels more like a perfectly blended romantic suspense as opposed to romance and suspense kind of like one, like some romantic moments, some suspenseful moments, and you know what I mean? Like that doesn't, sometimes it feels blended when you do it the other way, but this one kind of blends it much, much better on top of breaking that mold. And again, you're not asking, the question's not who is it and who did it. The question is like, how are they going to get out of this? And what's going to happen to them when they do? And is that going to help or hinder the characters in their arc, their personal character arcs, especially Silas, you know, and how it's going to make things better or worse. And I just really enjoyed it. And for me, the Christian messaging in this was so much more powerful. And again, I don't know if it's because it was kind of about Silas's personal journey to finding God and how he gets there, which is done in a realistic way. But at the end, it was also, it took a little bit, not longer to wrap up because it was still wrapped up in like 2 chapters, but longer than the previous books. As the previous books, when it's over, you kind of have that epilogue-y chapter that kind of gives it a happy ending, wraps it in a nice little bow. And the same thing happened in this one, but the wrap up took like 2 or 3 chapters as opposed to just 1, because there was a lot more that was done. And they do focus on the spiritual aspect too, like coming through to the spiritual journey in a realistic way. And then on top of that, when the initial circumstance that I thought was going to be the ending, like dramatic point, there was actually a follow-up moment. And I remember being disappointed by the endings for different reasons in the previous one, where either one, some of the previous books have had endings that were like too easily solved and resolved too quickly, and it was also predictable, and that was like really disappointing for me, and why I dropped the rating of the last book, even though it was like really intense. Same with the 3rd book, although the middle section, because they were kidnapped together, that did help, and I feel like this is very similar, but this one keeps it going, whereas that one did resolve that, and then you had kind of an ending circumstance on that one. But with this one, I feel like it was the proper amount of, okay, something happens, big dramatic climax, you think it's over, it's going to get resolved. That's where the normal books would end right there. But this one, something else happens, and then you have another dramatic moment, and that's kind of what the other books miss, that this one nails. And I love it so much. So this, again, like I said, I kind of already spoiled my star rating, but this is a 5-star rating for me. And I do enjoy this series, and I do highly recommend this series for people, especially who want a Christian romance that have emotional weight, where the couple actually have depth to them, the characters have depth, they have character arcs, and also if you like a little suspense and action thrown in with the romance, this is a really good series to read. The Coastal Hope series by Jessica Ashley, and for me, Perilous Healing was the best out of the series. I do still recommend reading them in order. They're still standalone, but you will see glimpses of the other couples kind of living their life together. And so I really enjoyed this book. And honestly, for me, she apparently in this one, Silas's cousins have this like rescue operation team that they have set up, and it mentioned them in the last book. And then in this book, they're a lot more prominent in the end, and it kind of sets up her next series, which is about them. And so I may eventually dive into that a little bit, because we introduced Silas's cousin Brayden, who is going to be, the first book's going to be about him. I don't know exactly what those books are going to be about, and if they're going to continue getting better and better like this one is, or if they're going to go back to kind of a copy and paste kind of thing, but I'm definitely going to give them a chance. So have you guys read these books? And if you have, what did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And in the meantime, if you liked this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you liked my review of Perilous Healing, then check out my review of the first book, Pages of Promise, which is here. It's the book that started it all. It started my whole journey in this series by Jessica Ashley. Check it out. You don't want to miss it.